The moment I grabbed the microphone at my daughter's wedding, I knew everything was about to fall apart. Behind that white gown, behind the sparkling hall, behind the laughter and the applause, there was a secret so devastating that once it came out, it would not only destroy this wedding, it would shatter all of our lives. But the louder I kept quiet, the louder the scream inside me grew, as if something was strangling my throat. The hall glittered under golden lights. People danced cheerfully, glasses clinked, children ran around laughing. Everyone believed in a happily ever after. Everyone was convinced the groom was a kind, loving man. But I was the only one who knew the truth about him. My heart felt like it would burst from my chest. Everyone was watching me, but most of all, the groom. When he looked at me, the thing he hid behind his smile, it chilled me to the bone. Others read the spark in his eyes. As love, I could see the darkness lurking behind that gaze. I gripped the microphone. My hand trembled, my lips were dry, and then silence cut through the room like a knife. Among the flowers, the laughter, and the dancing couples, I stood alone. I took a deep breath. My voice wavered, but the words came out. "There's something terrible I need to tell you." At that moment, tears began to roll down my daughter's face. The microphone was in my hand, but I couldn't force a single word through my throat. Faces in the room fixed on me. People waited with curiosity. My daughter watched me, holding her breath. But the groom, his gaze pierced right through me. He smiled in that taunting way, as if silently daring me, "Go on, say it." Over and over inside my head I thought, maybe I'm wrong, maybe no one should know. But then one night came back to me. I could never forget that night. It had been months earlier. When my daughter told me how wonderful her fiancé was, I saw the sparkle in her eyes. She was a young woman who'd found the love of her life. I should have been happy. Instead, a strange unease gnawed at me. That unease turned into certainty through a coincidence that happened shortly before the wedding. One evening, on my way home from the market, I saw him, my daughter's fiancé, with another woman, their hands intertwined, the same dark gleam in his eyes. They didn't notice me, but I saw them. I froze. My blood ran cold. One question echoed through my mind. If this man behaves like this even days before the wedding, how will he ruin my daughter's life? But that was only the beginning. Because soon what I would learn would show me who that seemingly innocent man really was. The scene I saw outside the market gnawed at me like a worm. For days I tried to convince myself I'd been mistaken, but the voice inside me wouldn't be silenced. Then one day, a message arrived on my phone that turned my world upside down. I didn't know the number. The message read, "Look into that man." "He is not who you think," my heart pounded. At first I thought it was a prank. Minutes later, a second message from the same number arrived. "If you want to protect your daughter, look into his past." My hands shook. I deleted the messages and told no one, but my mind burned with one question. What's in his past? What makes him so dangerous? From then on, I paid attention to everything. I memorized even the smallest detail I heard about him, the odd looks from his friends, the anger he hid when he spoke, that sudden flash of darkness in his eyes. One day, while my daughter was at the dress rehearsal picking flowers, I noticed the groom had left his phone on the table. I couldn't resist for more than a few seconds. I opened the screen, and what I saw chilled me. There were photos, messages, secret conversations that had nothing to do with my daughter. More terrifying were the documents hidden in the phone's private folder. When I saw those files, I realized he wasn't just a cheater. He was part of something much larger and far darker. My hands and feet went numb. The more I stared at the screen, the harder it was to breathe. My heart felt like it would leap out of my chest. I skimmed past the photos and messages, but that folder felt like a door to hell. Most of the files were encrypted, but even the file names were enough to make your blood run cold. List17.pdf. Survivors. Of the accident.docx. Silent witnesses.mp4. I didn't know what they meant, but I knew one thing. None of those files had anything to do with a happy marriage. Worse yet, the only document I could open was a list. It contained dozens of names. One of those names was my daughter's closest friend. A hot wave went through my body. Why was her name there? What was this list? Why would the groom carry something like this on his phone? I put the phone back and clutched my bag with trembling hands. I stepped outside to take a breath, but my throat closed up. In that moment, I realized my daughter was being pulled into a game, and the groom was at the center of it. Since that night, one thought poisoned my mind. To save my daughter, I must reveal this secret in front of everyone on her wedding day. As the wedding drew nearer, my unease grew. I couldn't sleep. Every morning, I barely recognized the tired lines on my face. I kept asking myself the same question. What if I'm wrong? What if this is all a misunderstanding? Then I'll be the one who ruins my daughter's happiest day. But then I remembered that list. The list reminded me this wasn't a nightmare. It was real. Those names were too chilling to be coincidence. 2 days before the wedding, the groom caught me alone in our garden. In public, he played the role of a smiling, polite fiancé, but that day the mask slipped. He leaned in close and hissed, "I know you looked at my phone. Don't even think about it. If you speak, I won't just ruin your daughter. I'll ruin you too." Every cell in my body froze. I couldn't make a sound. I only looked into his eyes. Those eyes didn't belong to a human being. They belonged to some other darkness. Anger mixed with fear rose inside me. In that moment, I made my decision. I would not stay silent. My daughter would not be safe one more day beside that man. When I walked into the wedding hall, I already knew. No matter the cost, I would take that microphone and say everything. When the wedding day finally arrived, the hall looked enchanting. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting shimmering light, and every table was decorated with white roses. In the background, soft music blended with the guests' laughter, and happiness echoed from every corner. People embraced one another, whispering, "What a beautiful couple they make." My daughter looked like a storybook princess in her gown. The smile on her face was pure and radiant. Seeing her so happy softened my heart for a moment. Maybe I should stay silent. Maybe I shouldn't shatter her dream, I thought. But when my eyes drifted to the groom, the ice inside me grew again. With that face that tried to look innocent, he shook hands, cracked jokes, posed for happy photos. But I knew the truth. What he hid behind that mask was dark enough to turn this hall into a silent graveyard. As the guests raised their glasses, the groom looked at me for a moment. Our eyes met. The smirk at the corner of his lips reminded me of his threat. "If you talk, I'll destroy you too." My heart felt like it would burst. The laughter around me became a dull roar in my ears. The entire room blurred. Only my daughter's face was clear. Seeing her innocent smile made a scream rise inside me. She has to know. Everyone has to know. And as I prepared to stand and take the microphone, the moment that would change our lives began. My heart pounding wildly, I stood up. My feet felt nailed to the floor, but the voice inside pushed me. Now or never. I reached out. The moment I took the microphone, every sound in the hall vanished. The music stopped. The laughter froze. Even the clinking of silverware disappeared. Faces turned toward me one by one. Hundreds of eyes held their breath, fixed on me. My daughter's eyes went wide with shock. Her lips moved, but no sound came. The groom, however, didn't panic. On the contrary, he leaned back with that familiar, defiant smile, as if he had everything under control. My throat tightened. My hands shook. The microphone grew heavy in my grip. For a few seconds, I couldn't say anything. The hall was quieter than it had ever been. Finally, I parted my lips. My voice trembled, but it was steady enough. "There's something I need to tell you." A murmur spread. People began whispering. "What's going on? Why is she talking?" You could feel the questions ripple through the hall. My daughter looked as though she might stand, but I stopped her with my eyes. Despite the tears rolling down my cheeks, my voice grew stronger. "This man, the man you think is my daughter's husband, is not who you think he is." The hall turned to ice. The microphone was still in my hand. My lips were trembling. My eyes stayed on my daughter. In her white dress, she was pure and fragile, the very image of innocence. But the man standing beside her, the one the crowd applauded and praised as the groom, was in truth a stranger. I drew a deep breath. My voice cracked, but the words had already crossed the point of no return. "There's so much about this man you don't know. Staying silent has rotted me inside, but I can't be silent anymore, because here, today, in the middle of this innocence, everyone needs to know the truth." The hall was frozen in silence. A few guests furrowed their brows. Some whispered, but most of all, the groom, still smiling at me, not a flicker of fear in his eyes, as if he had known what I would say and was enjoying it. "I looked into his past," I said, my voice shaking. A buzz rose. People stared at one another in shock, and I discovered this man doesn't have an ordinary family story behind him. He's living a double life. What he's hiding is darker than any of us can imagine. Tears streamed down my daughter's face. She gripped her dress tightly. "Mom, what are you saying?" she whispered. But I couldn't stop anymore. The scream inside me had broken its chains. If I stay silent now, this marriage will only be a victory for him, and my daughter's life will turn into a nightmare forever. At that moment, an invisible shadow seemed to fall over the entire hall. The murmurs swelled. People were trying to understand why a mother would say such a thing at her own daughter's wedding. My daughter's tears streaked her face while the groom remained calm. That sly smile of his was shattering my heart. I held the microphone tighter. My voice couldn't shake now. I had waited for this moment. There was no going back. "In his past, there are things he can't explain," I said, looking out at the crowd. "I'm not just guessing. I've seen it with my own eyes." The crowd fell silent again. Everyone was holding their breath. I went on. I found hidden files on his phone, and in one of those files, there was a list. A shocked murmur rippled through the hall. Guests exchanged glances, whispering. One of the names on that list was my daughter's best friend. My daughter's eyes went wide. A trembling voice escaped her lips. What are you saying, Mom?" My eyes stayed locked on the groom. That list, it wasn't just some casual list of friends. That list was part of something, and I know your name is on it too. Suddenly, the whole hall turned its face toward the groom, but he was still smiling. He even tilted his head slightly, as if suppressing a laugh. Inside, a cold voice screamed, "They still don't know how horrifying the truth is. They haven't seen anything yet." The murmuring in the hall raced my heartbeat. People bent toward each other, whispering, "What list? What is she talking about?" My daughter tried to wipe her tears, but she couldn't hide the fear on her face. I took a deep breath. My grip on the microphone tightened. "I investigated," I said. My voice no longer trembled. It was firm. "And I learned this man's name isn't just on that list. His past is full of dark connections. You think he's just a handsome groom, but in reality..." The words caught in my throat. For a few seconds, I fell silent. The crowd seemed frozen. The groom, as if savoring every word, raised his eyebrows slightly and narrowed his eyes at me. "In reality, you don't even know who he really is." A few guests suddenly stood up, whispering in shock. Does he have another identity? What does she mean? They asked. I went on. You know nothing about him. Where he came from, what he really does, who he's been involved with in the past. Someone from the crowd called out, "What nonsense is this? It's a wedding day, stop slandering him." But I didn't back down. I raised my voice. I'm not slandering. The documents on his phone, the messages, the hidden files, I've seen them all, and they all prove he's someone far different from who you think. At that moment, the groom slowly rose to his feet. His smile widened. His eyes swept over the hall as if challenging everyone. And in that instant, a cold thought passed through my mind. It's as if he wants me to tell these secrets. As if I've been pulled into a game. The hall froze into silence. Everyone's breath caught in their throats. I gripped the microphone tightly and finally let out what I had been holding inside. This isn't easy to say, but I looked into his past. And I discovered this man is not the person you think he is. A few years before this wedding, he was living in another city, under another name. A wave of shock rippled through the room. A few people whispered, "What? Another name?" My daughter's face went pale as chalk. I went on, the words spilling from my lips like poison. I found his records. In one document, he used the name David H. In another, a completely different last name. And during that same time, a woman suddenly vanished. That woman's name was also on the list I found in his files. My daughter screamed, covering her mouth with her hand. Guests began rising to their feet, some believing me, others refusing to accept it. But the groom, he still didn't panic. In fact, he smirked as he glanced around, almost enjoying the shock that rippled through the crowd. My voice trembled, but I pressed on with determination. This man isn't just a groom. He's someone hiding his identity, concealing his past. And today, here, he's playing this game to bind my daughter to him, but I won't stay silent anymore. At that moment, his eyes locked onto mine. I saw his lips move. He mouthed the words, "Go on, you haven't told them anything yet." The murmurs in the hall swelled into near screams. People were out of their seats staring at me with wide, fearful eyes. My daughter, breathless and sobbing, stepped toward me. But I kept going. I couldn't stop now. "Yes," I said, my voice echoing. "He lived in another city years ago under a different name. And during that time, a young woman disappeared. That woman's name, Rao, was on his secret list." The hall went dead silent again. It was as though everyone held their breath. I chose my words carefully. I dug into police records. That woman was last seen with him, in a cafe. They were sitting side by side. Witnesses swore they saw them together. After that, she was never seen again. My daughter's legs buckled. She clung to her chair just to stay standing. "Mom, no, this can't be true," she moaned. But the groom only tilted his head, not a shred of fear in his eyes. It was as if he had been waiting for this very moment. He smiled, and in a voice only I could clearly hear, he whispered, "Tell them. Go on. There's more." My heart nearly dropped out of my chest, because he was right. There was more. Far worse things. I clenched the microphone tighter. Fear was fading, replaced by fury. Staring straight into his eyes, I spoke. "You think this was just a coincidence? Just one missing woman?" But I kept digging. I opened more files. I read the reports, and I saw. This wasn't his only secret. The hall erupted in nervous murmurs. Some guests shoved their chairs back. Others crouched as though bracing for an explosion. In the last 10 years, every city he lived in, there were mysterious disappearances, I said, my voice rising. In one city, a young man vanished. In another, a family disappeared without a trace. And every single time, his name was there, living in that city, passing through, working nearby. always with a different identity. My daughter gasped for breath, pressing her hands to her ears as if to block out the truth. I continued, "This man, this groom, isn't just hiding his identity. He's hiding the trail of darkness he's left behind." The list I found on his phone was filled with the names of the missing. Screams rang out in the hall. Guests stared at one another, whispering in fear. But the groom only chuckled. His laughter echoed across the room. "No one's ever put the pieces together," he said loudly enough for all to hear. "But you gathered them all, didn't you?" The hall erupted like a storm. Guests leapt to their feet. Some glared at me in anger, others whispered in horror. "She's lost her mind," some shouted. "No, what if it's true?" Others murmured with dread. My daughter's face was drained of all color. One moment she looked like she believed me, the next she begged me silently with her eyes to stop, but I gripped the microphone harder. "You can call me crazy," I declared, my voice sharp and unshaken, "but I am not lying." I saw the evidence. Documents, names, vanished lives, all tied to him. From the crowd, a man shouted, "This is a wedding. You have no right to say this here." My eyes never left the groom. He seemed to relish the chaos, his lips curling into an almost playful grin. And in that moment, I realized, to him, this wedding wasn't a ceremony. It was a stage, and I was just another actor in his performance. "Look at me," I cried, turning to the crowd. My voice thundered against the walls. "I'm speaking as a mother. I will not hand my daughter over to a monster. Call me insane if you want, but I will not hide this secret." The hall fell silent again. All eyes shifted to the groom, waiting for his response. And then he began to walk toward me, slowly, deliberately. His eyes never left mine, and with every step, the air in the room grew heavier. Guests held their breath, transfixed on what would happen next. When he reached the edge of the microphone, he leaned in, close enough to whisper but loud enough for the entire hall to hear, "You're just a frightened mother. So terrified of losing your daughter that you've started imagining stories. You're spinning lies." A few guests nodded, whispering, "Yes, that must be it." But I didn't back down. Clutching the microphone tighter, I glared at him. "They're not lies. You left traces. Missing people, false identities, files. And those files didn't just contain strangers' names." I paused. The entire room leaned in with anticipation. My voice dropped to a sharp whisper, but every word was crystal clear. "One of those names belongs to someone in this very room." A collective gasp rippled through the hall. Guests turned to one another in shock. "Who? Someone here? What does she mean?" they whispered. My daughter's breath hitched, her hands still pressed against her ears, but her eyes remained locked on me, and the groom, he only smiled wider. That sinister grin tore through me. He leaned in close, low enough for only me to hear. "Now the game begins." My words hit the room like a bomb. The instant I said, "Someone in this hall is on that list," hundreds of eyes darted around. People eyed the tables beside them with suspicion. Some shoved their chairs back. Whispers swelled into panicked voices. "What does she mean? Who is it? Someone among us? This is ridiculous." My daughter's eyes locked on me, full of worry. Her lips trembled. "Mom, please," she whispered, but her voice was swallowed by the crowd. I held the microphone and drew a deep breath. My chest was tight, but I had to go on. That list wasn't just a string of strangers' names. That list seeped right into the heart of this supposed innocence. A voice rose from the crowd, almost a scream. "Then who? Say it. Who is it?" But I went silent. Because at that moment I noticed something. The groom's eyes were fixed on me. That same cold, familiar smile tugged at his lips. He was daring me. "Go on. Say the name. Let's see what happens. The pressure in the room mounted. People stood, some shouting at me, others waiting in tears. I raised the mic to my mouth. "The name on the list," I said, my voice shaking. The entire hall seemed to stop breathing. Before I could continue, the groom laughed, a laugh that echoed off the walls, a laugh that froze the blood in people's veins. "Let me say it," he said, sweeping his gaze over the crowd. He didn't bother to smother his laughter. It wasn't joyous. There was something dark and threatening behind it. A chill ran down everyone's spine. "You think you don't know me?" he said, his voice deep and unnervingly calm. "I've been here for years. I've passed through all your lives, and not one of you ever realized who I was." Murmurs rose again. Guests turned to each other, whispering. Someone shouted in anger, "What is this madness? This is a wedding." The groom didn't flinch. He moved slowly, scanning the crowd. "She's right," he said, tipping his head toward me. "There is a list on my phone. And on that list are far more names than you think." Another wave of whispers. People jumped from their seats, some headed for the exits. My daughter shook with tears. "Stop, what do you mean?" she cried. He turned his head toward her. There was ice in his eyes. "The man you think you love is much more than that. And yes, just like your mother said, you're in the middle of a game. And unfortunately, there's no way out." The hall fell into a deathly quiet. Everyone was holding their breath. I tightened my grip on the mic. "You're terrorizing people," I yelled. He only shook his head. "No, I'm telling the truth. And your mother did the right thing. She started revealing secrets, but she still knows nothing." The groom's words froze the room. Some guests stared toward the doors, others stood rooted in place. I clenched the microphone harder. I couldn't stop. "Yes, that's right," I shouted. My voice cracked, but I didn't waver. "I saw the list on your phone. I traced the missing people, the fake identities. You do have another life, another face, another past. But what makes you truly dangerous is one name on that list." The room erupted. People cried out, "Who is it? Is it really one of us?" My daughter pleaded through sobs, "Mom, that's enough, please." But I kept my eyes on the groom and continued, "That name belongs to one of the innocent people here. And that name is—" The words knotted in my throat, because the groom suddenly burst into laughter, cutting me off. His laugh thundered across the hall. And then the doors slammed shut. Metal clanged through the hall, followed by a chorus of screams that pierced the air. People broke into a run. Some hurled themselves at the doors only to be shoved back, arms aching. There was no exit. In an instant, a hall bathed in golden wedding lights became a silent, airless trap. Women clutched their children. Men threw themselves at the doors. Some fumbled at their phones, but every screen showed the same message. No signal. My daughter ran to me, screaming, "Mom! What's happening?" She fell into my arms, my heart pounding as if it would rip out of my chest. But the groom seemed to draw power from the chaos. He stepped into the center of the room and spread his arms wide. His eyes gleamed. "Just like this!" he boomed, voice deep and threatening. "None of you are leaving. You're all going to learn the truth." The screams grew louder. People clung to one another. Some looked ready to faint. A few brave guests took steps toward him, but his eyes alone drove them back. I clutched the mic, fighting to steady my breath. "What did you do?" I shouted. He tilted his head. "I simply started tearing off the masks. You wanted to expose my secret." He fixed his gaze on me. "Now I'll expose all of yours." And in that moment, everyone went rigid. Because the groom wasn't just hinting at my past, he was implying he knew something about everyone in that room. The murmur in the hall faded into a heavy silence. Everyone was staring at the groom. He began to move slowly through the crowd, his eyes sweeping across the tables one by one. "You want to expose me, don't you?" he said, voice dripping with mockery. "But all of you have secrets. And tonight, every one of them will come out." He stopped at a table, leaned toward a middle-aged man. "You," he said, staring into the man's face. "Your wife thinks you're faithful, doesn't she? But I know about your midnight meetings. That name is on my list." The man turned ghost white. The woman beside him stared at her husband in shock. "Is that true?" she cried. The man stammered as the groom laughed. Then he turned to a young woman in the crowd. "And you," he said, lifting a finger, "you sit here looking so innocent. But I know about the fraud at your office. You thought you could hide your name on those documents, but that, too, is on my list." The woman screamed, knocking her chair over, covering her face with her hands. People began to recoil from each other in panic. Now everyone feared the same thing. What if he knows my secret, too? I gripped the microphone, shaking. "Enough!" I shouted. "That's not the point. You have no right to destroy everyone's life here." The groom turned to me, eyes flashing. "You're wrong." "That's exactly the point. I'm tearing off every mask. None of you are as innocent as you think, and I didn't keep that list for nothing." The air had become unbreathable. After each person he singled out, guests backed away from one another, suspicion flooding their eyes. Everyone was on edge, as if waiting for their turn. I drew a deep breath. My hands were trembling, but I raised the mic. "Enough," I said. My voice was cracked, but it rang through the hall. "Yes, it's true. Everyone might have something to hide, but that's not what this is about. This is about your secret." The murmurs died at once. Every head turned toward me. The groom lifted his brows, that belittling smile curling back onto his lips. "My secret?" he asked, amused. "Haven't you told them already?" I didn't look away. "No," I said firmly. "I haven't said anything yet. Because your real secret is something no one's ever had the courage to speak aloud." My daughter stared at me through sobs. "Mom, please," she whispered, but I pushed on. I brought the microphone closer. "The most terrifying name on that list is someone everyone here knows, and that name is what exposes who you really are." The entire hall froze. A few people forgot to breathe. Some looked ready to collapse. The groom moved closer and whispered, "You're going too far. If you say it, it won't just be the end of you. It'll be the end of your daughter, too." I narrowed my eyes. There was no turning back. As my words hung in the air, every gaze widened, and not even a whisper remained. The moment I said, "The most terrifying name on the list," faces turned to stone. The groom closed the distance to the tip of the microphone. The playful smirk was gone, replaced by a glacial seriousness. He whispered loud enough for all to hear, "If you say it, both your life and your daughter's end here." My throat tightened. Whispers rose from the crowd. "Who's the name? Just say it already." My daughter ran to me, clutching my arms. "Mom, please don't." "I'm scared," she cried. Her tears shattered my heart. But the voice inside wouldn't stop. "If you stay silent now, you'll hand your daughter to a monster." With trembling hands, I raised the mic. My voice came out rough but resolute. "This name will change everything, because it's the name that reveals who he truly is." A sheet of ice fell over the room. No one breathed. The groom suddenly burst into booming laughter. "You're not brave. You're just desperate," he said. Then he turned to the crowd and raised his voice. "The name she's about to say will terrify you. But know this, the moment you hear it, all your lives will change. Because the real enemy isn't just me." He cut himself off, his eyes locked back on me, that smile returning. "You have a secret too, don't you, Mother?" A muffled murmur spread. In an instant, every eye swung toward me. His words hung in the air. "You have a secret too, don't you, Mother?" Voices rose from the crowd. "What does he mean?" "She has a secret?" Suspicious eyes multiplied, all of them fixed on me. I gripped the mic harder. "He's lying," I cried, my voice breaking, but the groom laughed and shook his head. "Lying? Really? Then why didn't you tell anyone what happened in town all those years ago?" My heart went cold. My eyes widened. "Well, what are you talking about?" I whispered. He paced, addressing the guests as he stared them down. "You call me a monster. But she's the one who hid her past from you. Go on, tell them, Mother. Whose blood was in your car that night?" A deep rumble went through the hall. People held their breath. My daughter's face drained of color. "Mom, that's not true, right?" she whispered. The mic nearly slipped from my hands. My voice shook. That is something else entirely. It has nothing to do with him." But the groom leaned toward me with a smile. "Oh, it has everything to do with me. Because your secrets and mine are links in the same chain." The hall slid further into chaos. Some believed me, others clung to the groom's words, and I was being forced to face a burden I'd carried my entire life. The microphone grew heavy in my hand. His words echoed in my head. "Whose blood was in your car?" Every eye was on me. My daughter's broken whisper shredded my heart. "Mom, is it true?" My throat closed. The old pain I'd buried for years surged up. I took a long breath and spoke, shaking but resolved. "Yes, I kept a secret. Years ago, one night, in the rain, I was in an accident. A man ran out in front of my car. I screamed, I braked, but it was too late. I couldn't save him." A shocked murmur swept the room. Some guests covered their mouths. "I called the police. They said it wasn't my fault. I lived with the shadow of that moment for years. But yes, I couldn't share that burden with anyone." My daughter threw her arms around me, sobbing. "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" Tears streamed down my face. "I wanted to protect you. I never wanted you to carry something like that." The groom laughed. "You see? She hides things too. She calls me a monster, but she isn't innocent." I shook my head and lifted the mic. My voice was raw, but my words were clear. "Yes, I made a mistake. But I'm not a monster. I never hurt anyone on purpose. You can't weigh my secret against what you've done." He stared into my eyes, his smile like ice. "Really? Then what if I told you that accident wasn't a coincidence?" Another rumble rolled through the hall. I froze. "What do you mean?" I whispered. He narrowed his eyes, leaning in. "I think it's time you started questioning your past, the way I do mine." He turned slowly in the center of the hall, letting his gaze pass over everyone. Then his eyes locked back onto me, his voice ringing like steel. "Do you truly believe that night was just an accident?" My heart clenched. My hands trembled. "What nonsense are you talking about?" I snapped, but my voice sounded weak. He took heavier, slower steps toward me. "The man you hit that night, you never even saw his name in the police report, did you? But I know it, because his name is on my list." A shocked uproar tore through the hall. Guests turned to each other, breaths quickening. My daughter screamed, "No! That can't be true." I shook my head, tears spilling. "No, that's impossible." He laughed. "Impossible? Fate didn't shape your life years ago. The network I'm part of did. The man you hit wasn't just anyone. He was someone who needed to be silenced." Panic surged. People screamed, some prayed, others pounded helplessly at the doors. I raised the mic, my voice strangled. You made me carry your guilt for years. While I believed I was innocent, you planned this?" He stepped closer, that icy glint burning in his eyes. "You were just the first piece in my game. And today, I'm still knocking the pieces down. The groom's words stabbed into my chest like a knife. Learning that the burden I'd carried for years wasn't even mine shattered my entire world. My heart was in pieces. My knees trembled. I nearly collapsed. My daughter ran to me and took my hands. "Mom, no, don't believe this." "You're not a bad person," she whispered. Tears streaked her face. When I looked into her innocent eyes, my throat tightened. I raised the microphone to my lips, my voice shaking. "I have lived with that night for years. I blamed myself, spent sleepless nights. I saw that man's eyes, his scream, every night in my dreams. And now you're telling me it wasn't even my fault?" The groom nodded with a cold smile. "Yes, you were just an unlucky pawn who fell into the game I set. Your pain, your guilt, served me." Screams rose from the hall. His words only fueled the panic. Some guests began to pray. Others clawed at the doors. As tears ran down my cheeks, something broke inside me. But that break didn't knock me down. On the contrary, it forged a new strength, burning with fury. I gripped the microphone hard. My voice no longer shook. "Enough! You tortured me for years. You tried to stain my daughter's life and mine. But the game ends now. My daughter's hands were still in mine." Looking at me, she breathed a single word. "Mom, you're strong." In that instant, the scream inside me became a battle cry. Clutching the microphone, the crowd's murmur thundered in my ears like a muffled storm. I wasn't afraid anymore. The guilt that had imprisoned me for years had fused with the groom's dark secrets and turned into rage. The groom still stood in the center of the hall, chin lifted, his eyes fixed on me in defiance. "What are you going to do?" he said in an icy tone. "Tell everyone the truth? And then what? You know no one in here will make it out alive." I drew a deep breath and turned to the crowd, my voice steady. "Yes, what he said is true. That list isn't just some random file. It's a death list. The names of the missing, the silenced witnesses, and the innocent people here tonight." Screams erupted. People clung to one another. Some began to pray. Others broke down in tears. The groom laughed. "Brave words. But you still haven't said the name. Go on. Who's the name on that list?" My heart hammered against my ribs. I lifted the microphone to my lips. "The most terrifying name on that list is the one that reveals your true identity." A glacial hush fell over the hall. All eyes were on me. Every breath held. But just as I opened my mouth to say the name, the groom stepped forward, a demonic gleam in his eyes. "If you say it now," he said, his voice sharp as a blade, "it won't just be the end of you, it will be the end of your daughter, too." My daughter screamed and clung to me. "Mom, please don't," she sobbed. Tears streaked my face, but I stood tall. "No, tonight your mask comes off. Everyone will know." I raised the mic to my lips, and the entire hall hung on a single word. I raised it again. The crowd was breathless, hundreds of eyes fixed on me, waiting. The groom stood opposite me, his eyes burning with a crimson glow. "The name on the list," I said, my voice trembling but resolute, "was your real name." A storm of gasps swept the room. People screamed, chairs toppled. "What? He had another identity?" I gripped the mic even tighter. "Your name wasn't David H. or any of those other aliases. I found your real name, and that name shows up again and again in files on the vanished. Police reports, witness statements, sealed documents. Always the same name." My daughter trembled through her tears. "Mom, please, that's enough," she whispered. But there was no going back. My voice rang clear and strong. "You're not just a groom. You're the shadow behind years of disappearances. You're the killer who keeps the death list." Screams tore through the hall. Guests tried to flee, pounding on the doors. My daughter collapsed to the floor, sobbing. For a heartbeat, the groom lost his smile. Then, raging, he lunged at me. The microphone slipped from my hand and the hall roared with chaos. But just then, sirens wailed. The doors burst open. Police swarmed in, weapons raised. "Don't move!" they shouted. Sparks of fury lit the groom's eyes. He looked at me and hissed through his teeth, "This isn't over. We're only getting started." As officers pinned him to the floor and snapped cuffs around his wrists, panic and relief collided across the room. People cried, shouted, and rushed for the exits. My daughter threw her arms around me. "Mom, you saved us!" she sobbed. But I still felt the weight in my chest, because in the groom's eyes I saw a truth. This was only the beginning. Even face down on the floor, wrists cuffed, he was laughing. His laughter echoed off the walls, less human than the voice of darkness itself. The hall was a nightmare. Some people ran for the doors. Others hid under tables. Many were frozen in terror. Children cried. Women screamed. The wedding had become a scene from a horror film. I held my daughter tight. Her trembling felt like a dagger in my heart. "It's over. It's all over," I whispered into her ear. But even my own voice sounded unsure, because the groom, pressed to the floor, lifted his head and locked eyes with me. His lips shaped the words, "When you face him, you'll see this is where it truly begins." An officer shoved him back down. "Shut it," he barked, but the groom didn't care. He kept his gaze on me. That dark glint in his eyes hadn't faded. As my daughter clung to me, a chill rippled through my body. I felt it then. This wasn't just his crime. There were others behind him. The list was part of something far bigger. A noise outside drew my attention. Beneath the sirens and the screams, other sounds bled in. Footsteps, commands, metallic clicks. Even the police exchanged looks. Someone else was out there. The metallic clatter cutting through the sirens was coming closer. Panic whispers rippled through the guests. "More police are coming?" "No, this sounds different." Officers faced the doors, two lifting their guns, another grabbing his radio. Only static answered. "Signal's jammed," he shouted. My daughter squeezed me tighter. My heart was going to burst. The groom was still face down, hands cuffed, but that wicked gleam danced in his eyes. "They're here," he said, a cold smile curving his mouth. "Not for me, for you." The door slammed under a heavy blow. Guests shrieked and stumbled back. Children's cries and women's wails filled the air. Another strike hit the doors. Metal screamed. "Everyone down!" an officer yelled. No one listened. People dove under tables. Others rushed for the windows, only to find dark shapes beyond the glass, cold silhouettes standing motionless. I still held the microphone, but no words came, because I understood something. The groom had been right. Tonight wasn't just about his secret. A much bigger secret had come knocking. A final kick bent the heavy metal. Then, the first gas canister rolled into the hall. When it burst, the room filled with a dense, burning fog. Screams dissolved into coughing and ragged breaths. Tables overturned, plates skittered across the floor, crystal glasses shattered. Mothers shielded their children. Men threw themselves at the doors, but the shadows outside held fast. Everyone's eyes burned. Their throats felt flayed raw. My daughter clutched me, coughing. "Mom, I can't breathe," she whispered. I lowered her to the floor and tried to cover her with my body. Tears streamed from my stinging eyes. My throat was on fire. The officers were scattered. Two collapsed in coughing fits. The others waved their weapons blindly at no clear target. And in the center of the chaos, the groom still lay on the ground. Even with his hands cuffed behind him, a fiendish peace rested on his face. Through the haze, his eyes found mine, and his lips formed the words, "See? Even without me." The game goes on because I'm only a piece. His words burned worse than the gas in my lungs. A scream rose inside me. This wasn't just one man, it was an organization. I gripped my daughter's trembling hands. "Hold on," I whispered. But my eyes stayed on the groom, because in his gaze, I saw a certainty. This nightmare had only just begun. The dense gas had swallowed the hall. People's screams blurred into ragged breaths as the shadows beyond the windows began to slip inside. The doors shuttered one last time with a hard crash and then opened. Men in black clothing, faces masked, poured in. Metallic weapons gleamed in their hands. Their steps were heavy and deliberate. Each one made the floor seem to tremble. The crowd dropped to the ground in panic. Children cried in their mothers' arms. Hands rose in prayer. The officers leveled their guns. But the masked men were so unnervingly calm, it felt as if they controlled everything. I pulled my daughter beneath me and flattened to the floor. My lungs burned. Tears streamed from my stinging eyes. But I searched for the groom. He was still there, face down, hands cuffed behind him, a demonic smile on his lips. One of the masked men leaned toward him. They shared a brief look, and the groom's smile widened. "See?" he called to me through the choking haze. I was never alone. This wedding was only the opening act. In the center of the hall, one of the masked men barked, "The list is complete." "None of you are getting out," screams rose again. In that instant, I understood. We weren't facing one groom's secret, but the shadow of an entire network. As the masked men fully breached the hall and the crowd's shrieks echoed in my chest, I realized if I didn't act, no one would save my daughter. Coughing through the gas, I forced myself up. My daughter's "Mom, no!" pierced my ears, but I didn't back down. The microphone was still in my hand. My voice didn't shake. "Stop!" I shouted at the masked men. "You're doing exactly what he wants." But the real secret was hidden even from you. A beat of silence fell. The masked men glanced at one another. The groom laughed on the floor, cuffs biting into his wrists. "Good," he sneered, trying to confuse them. "But I don't keep the list. They do." I gripped the mic harder. My throat was raw, but my voice carried, "No. I know the truth. The list isn't only the missing. It's the traitors, too. And on that list..." I paused. Every masked gaze swung to me. The crowd held its breath. "Is your name." A low rumble spread through the hall. The masked men froze for a heartbeat. For the first time, the groom's smile cracked. "What nonsense is that?" he roared, fury ringing off the walls. I pressed on, steady. "Yes, they used you as a pawn. You thought you ran the game, but to your masters, you're just another name on the list." One masked man stepped forward, eyes fixed on the groom. He walked toward him, and the hall went silent. Everyone stopped breathing. The groom tried to push himself up with cuffed hands. Rage twisted his face. "What are you doing? I did everything for you. I kept the list." The masked man shook his head, voice Arctic cold. "You didn't fill the list. You were a tool, and tools are silenced when their time comes." The groom's smile vanished completely. Fear flashed in his eyes. No, this can't be." The crowd was paralyzed. Cradling my daughter, I stared in disbelief as the masked men hauled the groom up and forced him to his knees. "Stop!" I cried, voice breaking. "Take him, but let these people go." No one looked at me. The masked leader lowered his head and said in a flat, frozen tone, "The list is complete." A single gunshot cracked the air. The hall erupted in screams. The groom collapsed, lifeless. Without glancing at the body, the masked men turned to the doors. A signal. Then the doors swung open and the gas drifted out. They didn't even look at the people. In a few seconds, they were gone, like shadows. Only sobbing guests, shattered plates, and the groom's body remained. My daughter clutched me with trembling hands. "Mom, is it over?" she whispered. I stared at the groom's vacant face. My lips shook. "No," I said, "this is only the beginning." Cameras lay toppled near the stage's fallen flowers, the microphone glinting amid bloodstains. And the mic was still on, still recording. The air still reeked of gas. People lay huddled on the floor, weeping with the shock of survival. Officers began filtering in through the broken glass. The screams slowly thinned into a heavy silence. Holding my daughter, I kept my eyes on the groom's body. My heart still battered my ribs. I wanted to believe his death ended it all. But a cold certainty gnawed at me. Nothing was over. An officer approached. "Ma'am, you're safe now," he said. And then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, stunned. One message on the screen. "The list didn't end with you. We're watching." My hands turned to ice. No number showed. My gaze slid back to the groom's corpse, and I saw it. On his face, even in death, the faintest smile, as if he'd planned for this, too. "Mom, let's go home. I want to leave," my daughter whispered. I wrapped my arms around her and started for the exit, but one thought drowned out everything else. Tonight, we won a battle. But the real war is just beginning. And far off, threaded through sirens and fading screams, two shadows watched us. When we stepped outside, the night's cool air hit my face. Siren lights painted the sky blood red and blue. People were still running, officers hauling out the wounded. But amid the crowd, I felt only one thing. I was being watched. My phone was still in my hand. I didn't dare look at the screen. That single sentence was branded into my mind. The list didn't end with you. We're watching. My daughter wrapped her shaking arms around me. "Mom, let's go home, please," she begged. I nodded. I knew we needed to get far from here to keep her safe, but the whisper inside me wouldn't quiet. No matter where you go, they'll find you. A police officer approached to take my ID. As I reached into my bag, my fingers found a small, folded slip of paper. My heart lurched. Who had put it there? My bag had never left my side. With trembling hands, I opened it. There was only one sentence. "The next wedding is very soon." My eyes widened. I crushed the note in my palm. The officer asked what was wrong, but no words came, because in the crowd I saw them. Two figures in black coats, faces hidden, watching us, then slowly walking away. "Mom, someone was watching us." "Wanihi," my daughter whispered. Goosebumps raced up my arms. If she saw them too, my worst fear was real. Police swarmed around the venue, sirens pulsing. I got my daughter into the car. My hands shook on the wheel, but we had to leave. As we pulled onto the road, the city lights slid past like a blurred dream. In the passenger seat, my daughter hugged her knees and sobbed. I took her hand. "We're safe now," I said, though I didn't believe my own words. I checked the rearview mirror. In the traffic, the headlights of a black sedan stayed locked at the same distance. When I sped up, they didn't fall back. When I slowed down, they didn't pass. It was tailing us. My heart hammered. I accelerated, took 3 quick turns. Each time, those lights reappeared out of the dark. Through tears, my daughter looked into the mirror. Her lips trembled. "Mom, that car is following us." My throat went dry. I tightened my grip on the wheel. "Don't worry," I whispered. "We'll lose them." But a voice inside insisted this was only the beginning, because the note still crumpled in my fist read, "The next wedding is very soon." And maybe that wedding was already coming for us. The cold glow of those headlights still burned behind us. My daughter clung to me, trembling with fear. I clenched the wheel, my heart thundering. Right then, I made a choice. Running wasn't a solution anymore. That shadow would follow no matter how far we fled. We couldn't hide. I suddenly turned down a side street. My daughter screamed, "Mom, where are we going?" My eyes were steady. "We're done running. We're going to face them." The sedan stayed on our tail. I led it deeper, into darker streets. A strange calm settled over me. I had lived for years under the weight of guilt. Now I would live to uncover the truth. I glanced at the mirror. I couldn't see who sat behind those lights. But I knew one thing. This wasn't just the Groom's game. It was the shadow of something much bigger. I took my daughter's hand. My lips formed a vow. From now on, I'm not just a mother. I'm the one hunting them. The sedan's headlights still carved through the dark. The road stretched out like it would never end. And we were being driven toward the start of a new war. The screen went black. One line remained. The list isn't finished yet.